Or those in the back also.
Spanish ones?
They're both, yeah.
All right. Won't be excluded.
I officially call this meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Scotty to order. Carla, will you do the roll call, please?
Commissioner Gilardi,
Here.
Commissioner Berman,
Here.
Vice Chair Long,
Here.
Chair Moffett.
Here. Please stand for a land acknowledgement. The City of Cotati recognizes that we're on the ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have been stewarding and maintaining a relationship on this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. A pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have the minutes from our special meeting in front of us. Any edits or comments anyone on the council has about them?
I move that we approve the minutes from the January 13th, 2025 meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Next, we have changes to the agenda. Mr. Hausch?
There are no changes, Chair Moffett.
Thank you. Next, we have public comment. If anyone wishes to speak on a matter not on the agenda, now is your moment in time. Carla, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak in public comment?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Moffett, that will end public comment.
Thank you. On to matters at hand. We have the presentation of the Housing Element Annual Progress Report.
Planning Technician Eli Adeola will be presenting the APR this evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Moffett, Commissioners, members of the public. Once again, my name is Eli Ariola, a planning technician for the city. And tonight I will be presenting the 2024 annual progress reports, starting with the housing element APR. Next slide, please. For some background on the housing element APRs, the housing element is one of the 7 required elements of the general plan, and the housing element, unlike the other 6 elements, is updated every 8 years, most recently in 2023, making this the second progress report of the 6th cycle, which spans from 2023 to 2021. Housing element annual progress reports have been required by the state since 1980, when the state also began requiring regular housing element updates. The city is required to submit housing element APRs to HCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research by April 1st each year. The purpose of the APR is to demonstrate the city's progress in meeting its Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, and its progress in implementing the programs listed in the housing element. The city's RHNA progress is summarized in Table B of the report, and progress in implementing housing element programs is detailed in Table D. Next Next slide, please. As is customary, staff likes to use the APR presentation as an opportunity to provide updates on new housing legislation. And I thought it pertinent to highlight these three laws for the Planning Commission. First, we have impact fee deferrals. SB 937 restricts the city's ability to collect impact fees prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy. And this is significant because these fees have historically been collected at building permit issuance. So it's a change in procedure for staff. Moving on to entitlement extensions, AB 2729 grants 18-month extensions for housing development entitlements that were issued prior to January 1st, 2024, and would expire prior to December 31st, 2025. And for Cotati, this extension would apply to the entitlements issued for the Cotati Station apartments. So those entitlements will be extended for 18 months. And this next one is not represented on the slide, but Commissioner Gilardi had a clarifying question for staff regarding the opportunity map referenced on packet page 53. And to address this question, beginning with the 2025 APR, so next year's AB 2667 will require the city to report on the number of units approved or disapproved in the prior year within each opportunity area. In this bill, opportunity area refers to the resource area pursuant to the most recent California Tax Credit Allocation Committee and the Department of Housing Community Development Opportunity Map. These resource areas identify economic, educational, and environmental data for each census tract in California. For Cotati, all of the census tracts within the city are considered low resource areas, except for the census tract that the Windmill Farms subdivision falls within. And that is considered a moderate resource area. And I'll ask Director Hausch if you have anything to add for that.
Yeah, I would just add that kind of starting with the sixth cycle housing element, so the one we've already adopted, the state was looking at ways to try to do more than just mandate specific numbers of affordable housing units, but also identify where those affordable housing units would be built. So historically, I think the state was concerned over some of the concentration of low-income housing being in like one neighborhood or one part of a community or even one community. And so they used these resource areas to identify portions of communities that may be high resource, which, as Eli pointed out, is based on the economic environment, kind of income levels, environmental environment, so like access to regional parks and park acreage, those types of things. Schools and school district performance was also a factor, I believe. And then the idea was to, as using low-income units as an example, put those low-income units or mandate some of those low-income units to be built in these high-resource areas. And the idea being that folks who maybe are in lower-income families would then benefit from some of the amenities and access to opportunities that are present in those higher resource areas like the parks, the schools, and maybe some of the job opportunities that come with just being in a higher or more affluent location. And so what this is mandating is that we have to report on that. So not just do we have to, or were the RHNA numbers targeted for certain communities that may be deemed high resource, but also we have to report on the construction of those under this new law.
So clarifying question on that, because when I went and printed out the map and they outlined the area, it's not, it seems like there's parts of Cotati that should be included in this, but aren't, and that's why I'm confused. I don't know if the rest of you have seen this. I went online and so like this is the hub right here. This is the south area, but like this area is not included. So it just doesn't, who draws the map up?
Yeah, no, I agree. The map
It's
is
just-
really odd, and it's because it's census tracts, and those do not follow jurisdictional boundaries. And so a lot of Katati is also in census tracts of Roner Park. And so that skews our data or maybe our kind of resource areas when you just try to look at it from a Katati perspective. I agree, the mapping is really
Yeah,
wonky.
I looked it up and I'm like, well, this makes no sense at all to me. That's why I was confused. All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
No, we had the same thought.
Yeah. The area in black is what they considered the opportunity area, and I'm like, when you look at, see where the hub is, and south of the hub, you would think that would be part of it, but it's not. It just,
Yeah, and I'm not sure how they draw census tract boundaries. That was a really good catch. I appreciate you taking such a thoughtful read of the packet.
So do you know what the other areas of Katati, would they fall under a different map?
All of, all,
So that map, from what I could see, is one census tract. And so if you look online, you can look at the census tracts throughout California. And so they've categorized each of the census tracts within California as either highest, high, moderate, or low resource areas.
and all of Katati, with the exception of essentially the Santero neighborhood, is deemed low resource. So, which may not align with some of the, income levels or housing prices or anything, but from the state's perspective, under this law, that's where we align.
So in practical terms, how does that affect reporting?
For Katati, it shouldn't affect reporting too much because we can't report on anything other than the low resource areas or that one moderate subdivision. So I think this bill was written so that the state could track in larger jurisdictions that might have a variety of those categorization of resource areas within them to track where they're permitting affordable housing.
And I would say also probably looking at like Woodside and Atherton and some of those very affluent areas to also see that they've approved or tried to permit some of their low-income units as well.
Okay. Moving forward, the last bill that I would like to highlight is more of just something to keep in mind, as it has no immediate impact. AB 3093 explicitly defines extremely low and acutely low income levels and will incorporate these two income levels into the 7-cycle RENA allocations. Next slide, please, Carla. Katati's 6-cycle RENA is broken down by income category, including 60 units of affordable at the very low income level, 34 units at the low income level, 39 units at the moderate income level, and 101 units at the market rate level for a total of 234 units. Next slide, please, Carla. This table shows the number of units categorized by income level that the city has taken some action on within the last 2 years, be it issuing entitlements, building permits, or certificates of occupancy. And I would just like to emphasize that only 16 units included in this table are counting towards the city's RENA requirement right now. This is just encompassing, this table encompasses all of the action that the city has taken in the last 2 years. And so a city's, so a unit doesn't count towards a city's RENA until a project has been issued a building permit. And I wanted to use this table to make that distinction, that the city has taken action on a considerable amount of units, but we're not gonna see that reflected in the APRs until those projects are issued building permits.
Sorry, point of clarification, building permit or occupancy?
It will start counting once
As soon
it's
as it gets a
issued a
building
building
permit?
permit. Yeah,
Thank you.
of course.
Do you know where some of those projects, like the ones out on 116, kind of where they're at in that process?
Yeah, so the 116 projects, which is a majority of these units, were sold to a local developer out of Petaluma. However, they have indicated they don't intend to build for a number of years because they had just broke ground on some projects over in the Central Valley and I think Sacramento area. And so basically their plate is full with regards to their capacity to be able to pivot over and start construction here. So I think the slide is important to highlight that there's only so much the city can do towards meeting our RHNA. So we've been approving projects, the planning commission, you all have been really heavily involved in that step. The city council is very supportive, but there's a lot of other dynamics that go into actually getting a home constructed.
Next slide, please, Carla. So for the report summary, in 2024, 3 ADUs were issued certificates of occupancy, 10 units were issued building permits, and construction is underway on these units. 338 units were entitled, and 36 units were proposed in development applications received by the city. At this point, staff is hopeful to meet the city's RHNA requirements. As mentioned previously, the city has over 340 units dispersed throughout the permitting process and additional units in the pipeline. Specifically, these are in the 65 Lasker Lane, which has proposed 12 units, and it being duplexes. But each duplex will have an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, and a junior accessory dwelling unit, a JADU, for a total of 36 units. But how those get reported in development applications will differ from how it will get reported once building permits are actually issued, because each of those structures will get a building permit. And then at 120 East Cotati, the city has a 100% affordable development that is in the permitting process right now, as well as other efforts to encourage the development of housing, which I will hand over to Director Hausch to discuss now.
So this slide is intended to kind of talk about some of the programs from the housing element, and it's a status update on the city's progress in implementing those programs. So it's really Table D for the APR, and that's packet page 22 through 31. It's that table format where it lists each of the housing element programs, and then the response or status update in the far column as to what we've been doing and where we are in that. Generally, I think the city's been making great progress as identified. Specifically, we spent a lot of time coordinating with nonprofits to leverage their resources to kind of expand what we can do with our small staff to provide more resources to the community and citizens. We've been spending a lot of efforts to streamline our development review process. The Planning Commission has been instrumental in getting that done. We really thank you in helping us get some of the ordinance work to the City Council to make it easier for projects. And some of these efforts have included, more streamlining to ADUs, the cottage housing ordinance, the Cotati density bonus ordinance. And that's just a few of the things that we've been really trying to do to streamline the development review process. And then the last section on the slide kind of highlights some of the anti-discrimination and displacement efforts that the city has been making progress on, steps to further affirmatively further our fair housing which is a term that kind of started off in the federal government and has kind of woven its way down to the local level with regards to anti-discrimination and ensuring equal access to housing opportunities throughout the community. And then even requiring some cultural sensitivity training for our code enforcement staff, just to make sure that as they look at potential code violations, they're thoughtful about what we're looking to kind of enforce. And one example with that is there's a mandate, some state law that limits the city's ability to prohibit the construction of like religious altars, so some structures that are on an altar or a religiously affiliated construction project actually reach the size of a definition of a structure under the building code. However, the state has kind of carved some of those out and told us to back off with some of those things because generally they're not occupied. There's not a risk to the community from having those. And there's a few around the county. As you look around, you can see them. We even have at least, I believe, 2 here in Cotati that are visible from different vantage points in the community. But that's just an example that some of the things we've been doing to implement these programs. Like I said, there's almost 10 pages there, so welcome any questions if you have clarification. But we've been really making a lot of effort, and we're in a good place to continue that effort. The City Council has allowed us to prioritize housing for the next fiscal year, and that'll really shape up in the coming budget discussions as those move to adoption. I'll turn it back to Eli.
Next slide, please, Carla. And so it is recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission review the provided information, identify any concerns or direction for staff, and file the report for future discussion. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes. The letter that we got from Generation Housing was talking about impact fees. And how do our impact fees compare to the new models that Santa Rosa has and the county has? And are we out of whack?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's 2 things I would say. So one, I don't think Generation Housing has access to some of the most current information about a lot of the changes we've been making. So, if you look at their letter, they reference some of the things saying we haven't done certain things that the commission has been a part of voting to do. I've actually had some discussions with the executive director at Gen H, and one of the kind of challenges with us is our code publishing is about 6 months behind. So from the time the council adopts it, it can take up to 6 months to have it be published in the online code. And so if they go and ask their staff to do evaluation of what's out there, that's the source they're going to go to. And so I think there's a little bit of just not being in alignment with things we've done based on what's available online. And I've asked them to allow us to review what they're trying to evaluate and then allow us to comment on it before they publish things. And so we're working on building that relationship. And then to your point, I did not see their accounting of how they're making the distinction between our fees and other jurisdictions in the county, but I do think it's a worthwhile effort to try to get all of our fees in one kind of comparison matrix so we can see where we are. And I will say we have not taken the step that Santa Rosa has taken and the county has taken to waive development impact fees for affordable housing units. The council on a case-by-case basis has, in some instances, chosen to subsidize those fees. And Cotati Station is actually a good example of that project, or of that effort. So the developer said, hey, I'm going to be building 16 affordable housing units. That's beyond the requirement of the city's code. Can you assist me with offsetting some of the costs of that by kind of subsidizing some of the development impact fees? And the council agreed to that. I will say it's a broader discussion to make a decision to just waive impact fees. And there's a number of factors. One, those fees are there to address the cost of providing those services to those units. So if you waive it, you're essentially asking the general fund to subsidize it, whether it's at that time or a later time. And so I think in order to make that decision, it needs to be a fully transparent discussion as to what that decision really is meaning. And then the other thing is that would be a gift of public funds towards the project, which then would require prevailing wage, which then could add cost to that project. For affordable housing projects, usually there's public money already involved, and so it doesn't have it may not necessarily push it to a prevailing wage project when it wasn't already intended to be. But again, it's just a couple points that, from the staff perspective, deserve a very thorough discussion for the community to make such a decision to just waive impact fees for certain types of units.
It would be interesting, you know, when we do get it all put together, to see how our fees compare with our neighbors, to just kind of see, you know, where we are, if we're low on some, high on some. Thank you.
With the impact fees, the stuff we had worked on in the past that you're referencing, that's a deferral of the impact fees?
Correct. So as Eli mentioned, right now, or under past processes, when you issued a building permit, you would pay all of your impact fees up front, and sometimes that can be millions of dollars if it's a big project, which means you had to carry the cost of that through the whole life of your project under a construction loan before you refinanced into your permanent kind of mortgage on the project once it's built. So, and that's at a higher interest rate. So just that deferral process allows you to save not only the upfront cost of those impact fees, but then also the interest that you would be carrying on that cost through the whole life of the construction, whether it's a year, 2 years, those types of things.
Okay. Just kind of looking at our RHNA numbers and the lower end of the brackets categories, the very low income, low income. What would you say in the our housing element that kind of talks about the different strategies we're employing that you kind of touched on earlier? Is there anything specifically within that is kind of helping to incentivize people to build more within those categories and instead of, it seems to be, builders seem to be more focused on the above moderate income? Yeah.
That's a good question. So,
Well, sorry to interrupt you, in the very low income, there's a good portion in that bucket as well, but it's kind of the two middle ones that seem to be getting overlooked.
Yeah, so, majority of the state housing law, which I was going over some of my notes, over the past 8 years, there's been 300 pieces of housing legislation enacted through to 2024, so that's not even in 2025 yet. And that's 35 bills a year just on housing. And so a lot of those have looked to create different incentives, and as we know, the density bonus process lets people take advantage of getting a significant number of extra market rate units by building very low income. So all the projects we've seen recently have been these very low income density bonus projects. And to your point, we've kind of not seen a lot of low income and the moderate income. No one's proposed that since under this housing element. So the 120 East Cotati Avenue project is one where the city used our housing funds to buy that site, and we are trying to get that project to be a mix of very low income and low income as one strategy to try to meet that. One of the other factors is all the available funding sources. The developer has to kind of line up the project characteristics to meet the funding sources that are going to be available to actually get the project built, because there's a lot of grants and other elements of state funding that go into it, and they have their own criteria. We think we're going to be successful with having a pretty good mix of very low and low income units in that project. So that's one strategy that we've taken, is actually kind of requiring certain things that we want with a project that we have control over, because we have funds in that. The other one is with the Cotati density bonus. And so we intentionally wrote flexibility into the ordinance that says somebody's going to take advantage of the Cotati density bonus, use our existing RHNA numbers and where we are to decide what levels of affordability you're going to propose. And so that was a policy change that the commission supported and the council ultimately adopted that allowed us to try to target some of our efforts to get just beyond the very low income. And the last thing I'd say is, one of the things we're trying to do, and we talked to the council about doing for this upcoming fiscal year, is really to kind of take our policies on the road. And we've talked about the, Cool Katati program, which is not the final name, but
It's a working time.
yeah, exactly. Just trying to basically let everyone know about all the changes that we've made here as a community and to support housing and get more things built, and just get the word out with the goal of trying to get a few projects to move forward, and then also to try to look to be creative with the affordability levels that they're using, and not just go for the kind of the very low income 50% density bonus that the state's given them.
Right. The way that regulation was written, it kind of incentivized people to focus on the very low and then put the rest into kind of the market rate housing.
That's correct.
Because the market rates, those don't have the 50-year deed restrictions on them. It would just be the very low income.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So with the 120 East Katati development, the city's not looking at any of the moderate income bucket.
We don't anticipate that will meet some of the funding sources that the developer's targeting to actually get the project built.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you were referencing there.
Mm-hmm.
So if we miss one bucket, I mean, it's kind of, there's not clear guidance from the state on how they would treat the city, say we came up short on one bucket.
So what we've seen, and Eli, you might know, there's some state law that, and I can't remember if it's the Housing Accountability Act, or there's another provision where if you're deficient in one of your RENA categories, developers are allowed to essentially not follow your zoning, but I think they have to then target that category. Do you know what I'm referencing? No.
That's the developer's remedy, or?
Yes, builder's remedy,
Builder's
that's
remedy.
correct, yeah, and I'd have to do some legal research to give you specifics, but my understanding is if you're deficient in one category, then builder's remedy allows you to not follow the city's zoning. But what I don't know is, so say we're deficient in moderate, if that then gives them a get out of jail free on any development. It shouldn't, but
Yeah,
I need to read the law to
okay,
provide a 100% accurate answer.
okay.
I would just add that I'd have to do some legal research as well, but there's been some legislation that has been proposed recently to allow cities to count up for their RENA. So if you're deficient in low or moderate and you have excess in your very low, then you could potentially count some of those units up to say that you have met it, but clearly they wouldn't let you count down.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, do you mind just kind of giving us a quick report back on that, either at the next meeting or in an email? I'd just be curious about that affects us.
Of course.
If we come up short in just one bucket, but we're hitting the marks in all the other ones, and then kind of what we could do to address that.
Regarding the moderate income, does that need to be deed restricted to moderate income, or can it be naturally occurring in that
So
range?
that's a great question. So generally, anything that's counted as affordable housing is deed restricted. However, for HCD purposes, for reporting purposes, if we can document a reason why our units should count in a category, they do let us. There's been some changes to that, and so I don't know if it's up to a certain percentage of your RENA number, like 25%. But one example is that we've been doing to try to get some additional information is now when anyone builds an ADU, we ask them to take a survey and tell us what their anticipated rental rate is, or how they're going to use the property, right? And so that way we can try to have some documentation to then back up what we tell HCD when we say, hey, this person has told us they're going to rent it at this level, and based on the fact that it's a one bedroom and blah, 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 it's going to be at this income category. So then basically we're trying to figure out different ways to be able to take credit when we can document it. Historically, they've been actually fairly flexible with the documentation requirements. They've been tightening it up more recently as they've been tightening up everything regarding housing. But I don't know if it's limited to a percentage, and I'd have to do that research. Do you know?
I think it is limited to a certain percentage, but I don't know what that exact percentage is.
I could just see some of even our newer units here in Cotati falling into that moderate income level for the area. Question about the Cotati density bonus, because that was kind of us trying to address some of these low and moderate income areas. Has there been any interest in any developers taking advantage of the Cotati density bonus?
So we had, trying to think now. We had a meeting with one developer or one property owner who had a developer partner that got fairly along in the process. But then they kind of have pulled back because of some of the uncertainty with what's going on with interest rates and potential construction costs if tariffs go into effect that then significantly affect the cost of materials. And then also some of the labor shortages that could occur, specifically in housing if we have, significant pullback in immigration, those types of things. So unfortunately, again, it gets back to some of the market dynamics that we don't control everything. The one person who was most interested has since indicated they intend to sit on the sidelines for a bit longer to try to let some of the uncertainty settle out. That being said, we do have a couple pretty serious parties that are interested in developing in Cotati that have not filed applications yet, but we're in meetings. And we're kind of putting all the cards on the table as like, you could go this route or this route or this route, and they're trying to evaluate options. And it's in the Santero area. So it's somebody who's partnered with us along the way as we've worked to get that new plan in place. And now they're looking to take advantage of those recent changes that the commission and city council supported that do make it easier to develop in that neighborhood.
Any other questions before we open it up to public comment? Okay, let's open it up to public comment. Anyone in the audience like to comment? Carla, would anyone on Zoom like to comment?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. If you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Chair Moffett, that will end a public comment.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No? Do we have a motion or are we just receiving?
This is just receive and file.
Okay, thank you. Moving on next to the presentation of the general plan annual progress report.
Thank you. I will be presenting this annual progress report as well. The 2024 general plan APR. Next slide, please, Carla. Some very general background. The general plan identifies the city's vision for future development and provides the framework for decision-making. The current general plan was adopted in 2015, and the general plan APR provides a status update on the progress in implementing the actions within each of the elements of the general plan, exclusive of the housing element. And this APR is also due to both the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and the Department of Housing and Community Development by April 1st as well. Next slide, please, Carla. As previously stated, the general plan APR provides a status update on the implementation of each of the elements included in the general plan except for the housing element. Each element has a set of goals that are supported by objectives, and each objective has a set of policies and actions that are meant to implement that objective. And the actions for each element are compiled into an implementation table that staff has utilized as the format for the APR. To complete the APR, staff gathered information from responsible city departments regarding progress made on each action during 2024. Next slide, please, Carla. And there are two primary types of actions in the implementation plan, ongoing and project-oriented. The ongoing actions include city services, maintenance, partnerships, and data collection. And project-oriented actions include capital improvements, new programs, and code or policy updates. The level of specificity and complexity of each of the action varies throughout the general plan. And this APR will be presented to City Council on March 11th and will be submitted to the state by April 1st before the deadline, along with the housing element APR. Next slide, please, Carla. I'll pass it off to Director Hausch for this slide.
Yeah, the commission will remember kind of the general plan, we call it the constitution for the city. So the policies and actions kind of cut across all city departments, all elements of the tasks that the city undertakes. Sometimes they're individual efforts, sometimes they're a combination of, different departments, and sometimes they're even folks outside of the city. So these goals, objectives, policies, and actions are a mix of aspirational kind of highlights, specific tasks, as Eli identified, and the responsibility is spread kind of as broadly as the number of program or chapters that are in the general plan. A couple of things to note is that the general plan was adopted in 2015, and it was primarily based on input that was received, early in the process, 2013, 2014. And so some of the goals and tasks have become kind of outdated as priorities have shifted. Others are really were and have remained beyond the city's control. And so, the chapter 11, which is the implementation chapter that we took and built the report basically out of that format, is pages 86 through 185 of the packet, so 99 pages. And I'm sorry, I apologize for the 99 pages, but it is a good snapshot of where we are and also where we were 10 years ago when we adopted that plan. So it's a good bridge to kind of to take a moment once a year to see the things that we thought were really top priorities there, how we've worked to implement those, and then how some of those may have fallen off as other priorities have arisen. And that's one of the challenges with these plans is as soon as you adopt it, it kind of starts to get stale, right? And so city staff and the community development department have been pushing to update the general plan. It's a big priority for us. There's some pretty important things that we feel like we need to address. However, it's a big budget lift. And so given the kind of, increasing costs, especially the significant increases over the last few years, the city council has not prioritized the general plan update in this budget cycle, but CD staff is going to continue to prioritize it and try to find creative ways to address some of the deficiencies that I'm sure you noticed as you reviewed the general plan kind of implementation matrix. So just kind of wanted to highlight that. It's kind of a recent thing that the state asked us to start reporting on these. Historically, we were not required to report on this. But again, it kind of gives us a good check-in moment to see kind of where we are with some of our efforts. And then the last thing I would say is the implementation chapter, it has kind of a complete or an in process or in progress box. But some of these efforts are kind of ongoing, constant things that we have to do, and others may be things that we've moved on from as a priority in a community. And so I feel like it's important to note that as we kind of take a look at this snapshot from 10 years ago that we took when we were kind of crystallizing our priorities at that time. With that, I'll turn it back to Eli.
Next slide, please, Carla. So with that, it is recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission review the provided information, identify concerns or direction for staff, and once again, file the report for future discussion. Thank you.
Questions?
I'm going to speak up. Good evening. Good evening. I noticed that we don't have an arborist on staff. I think that it would be a good idea to have an arborist go around and check out our trees as they are falling. And I went right through a stop sign today at Delano Park because I didn't know why I was stopped. There was no reason, and somebody cut the tape. So I looked, why is this park closed? And then I saw on the ground that there's a tree ready to fall. But it was not up, it was on the ground. And if there's a tree ready to fall, why aren't we assisting the tree to fall? Because so far, these trees that have fallen haven't hurt anybody, but I'm afraid for our public that they will. So I'm wondering about an arborist. So that's one, and not full-time, obviously, but just to check the health of our trees. And the other thing, we refer to the food stamp program as some kind of, I'm not sure that the food stamps are so much that it assists anybody to do anything, especially at the farmer's market. So, I mean, we need to have more farmers at the farmer's market. Yeah. And also, I just would like to see more food being grown here. I don't know how to access the food that's being grown across the street. I would like for where I live to put up food in the empty spaces. You know, we should be growing our own, what with tariffs and things. We need to figure these things out. So, yeah. And I wouldn't know how to grow anything if I knew how to grow anything. So I'm the first person who needs to go to the farm and learn how to grow, because I'm very short. So I need a little fertilizer myself. In any case, I'm hoping that we can find ways to feed ourselves. And I'm sure with the costs of things that hunger is going to be prevalent. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Last year, we did some rezoning to align with the general plan. Do you know, has there been any, has that gone through? Have those been finalized?
Yeah, so all of that effort that came before the commission and the city council last week is complete. And actually, we have had some interest in one of the properties that benefited from that rezoning. So that's one of the groups that I've indicated has been talking to us. Actually, separate from Santero, it's some parcels over here on Lund Hill that have been a very challenging set of lots to develop. And there's somebody now in contract who is a sophisticated developer. So whether they choose to move forward and you know, design a project, we'll see. But we were able to motivate their interest between the rezoning that occurred to clear the underlying planned development district. I don't know how much the commission remembers, but it was a very specific zone on those properties that was kind of, it limited what could be built on them. And then also with the Cotati density bonus, those two things together made this development group interested enough to put the property under contract as they explored options.
Is there any more rezoning efforts scheduled for this year?
So one of the things, actually, Eli has been working on a code cleanup ordinance just to kind of clean up some of the, you know, oddness that occurs whenever you have rules that you try to apply to the whole city that maybe it's not internally consistent. So he's been doing some of that work. But then separate from that, you may remember when we presented the Santero plan, there were some additional parcels beyond that that would require or that are subject to those same state rules for TOD development, transit-oriented development, because they're within a half mile. So the city staff now needs to start that rezoning process, engage with those property owners, those neighbors, have the conversations, and then bring that ordinance forward. And that's expected to start in the coming months.
Earlier, when you were talking about the general plan, you mentioned, you know, you kind of discussed how some of it has become outdated. over the life of the plan. Is there anything specifically, there's a lot here and it was kind of hard to tell what's maybe current and what's outdated. Is there anything that kind of jumped out to you guys that maybe needs a second look at, needs to be revised?
Well, some of the things that I know that I'd like to address are the circulation plan. So some of the commissioners will remember that the current circulation graphic actually identifies Alder Avenue as being closed and turned into a cul-de-sac, and then a new street being built about a quarter mile west of Alder to connect over to Hellman. That new street would run through people's properties, it would run through wetlands, it would run through very significant mature oak trees. And the reasoning behind that, as it was explained to me, is that there was concern over Caltrans spacing requirements between signals. And so if we signal West Cotati, which Commissioner will remember is proposed to be realigned to allow direct access at a new signal into the Redwood Row and Cotati Village properties just east of Alder, then there was a concern that having Alder access at that point wouldn't be allowed by Caltrans. And so it was kind of tail wagging the dog, pushing all these new roads that are going to be very expensive, very environmentally destructive, and frankly, very challenging to get built. And I actually think Caltrans' philosophy has changed significantly over time to now take a lot more input from local communities when their Caltrans facilities are running through their towns. So that's one example. The other is our parks graphic. So we have a ratio of how much parkland per resident that we want, but we don't have a graphic that identifies any location of those parks for new parks to be built. And specifically, we're lacking parks on the west side of town. And so that's an effort I really think would be important for the city to prioritize, identify locations for those parks to be. And that way, as development occurs over time, that's how you can then force developers to donate land or add some of the cost of that park development as a part of their project, because you've taken the time to identify and prioritize it. And then also the community tells you what their needs are with regards to access, location, those types of things. So those are just a couple highlights. I don't have anything specifically to point to as a part of the individual actions, but I could take some time to try to be ready for that if there's an interest in kind of more specifics on the actions.
So you said that the council is not budgeting money this year to update the general plan. So when there was money budgeted, that's when these kind of revisions, this isn't, like, you don't make revisions kind of ongoing.
So you can do general plan amendments. Generally, they're a lot more focused and small. It would be one parcel at a time oftentimes. Developers can propose general plan amendments, but there gets to be a point where if you're doing so many, another one that we need to do is the public safety element, because, we've had a lot of change with regards to safety, wildfire responses, all those things since 2015. That also needs to be addressed. And so there's some state law that says once you touch so many pieces of your general plan, you have to update the whole thing. And so there's some other kind of economies of scale that we'd be forced to try to take advantage of if we did more than just a few very targeted changes.
What was that last one? Sorry.
Well, the public safety,
Public safety.
yeah, emergency response.
What do you think as far as, it's kind of outside of our realm of decision making, but how out of date do you think this general plan is?
Well, I don't think it's it's probably middle of the road, I would say.
Yeah.
There's some cities who, use 20-year-old general plans. It's generally a 20-year development horizon when you are doing this effort. So it looks out to 2035, maybe 2030. And so it's not, it hasn't reached a plate where it's obsolete or unusable. It's just a lot has changed, as we talked about. And I think a lot of the community priorities have changed. And so some of the things I've talked about, and then some of the needs like the public safety elements, wildfire, evacuation routes, that type of planning really needs to be built into the overall circulation plan, that type of stuff.
Okay. I would just make a suggestion for the presentation to the council that maybe we provide a couple of staff recommendations on things that could be had a second look at, so that they kind of know where to focus in at. That's all I got.
I just have a couple questions on some of these programs, and I recognize that not every element within the general plan falls under your department, but I'm going to ask them anyways. For traffic, can you tell me, one of the things I see on packet page 90, we talk about establishing the active transportation plan and specifically looking at traffic lights. Are all of our lights censored or are any of them timed?
It's my understanding it's a combination of sensors and timers, but I'd have to double check with Public Works.
Okay. Do they have a report? They say that they have an annual traffic signal maintenance contract. Is that ever reported out on?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But we do have I know we have a contract to do regular maintenance work and then also make changes. You might recall when we made some changes downtown regarding the intersection of Old Redwood Highway and East Cotati. There was a significant amount of signal work that went into those restriping efforts.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the sidewalk gap closure project, where are we in that project? Out of curiosity, since we're doing annual
It's also Public
report?
Works, so I'm not sure. I do know that the cost of some of the projects were greater than anticipated, so not all of the gaps that were identified are going to be funded. But it's my understanding that the School Street is wrapping up as we dry out and the temperatures increase enough for some of the materials to set. And then Olaf is getting a fix. There was a lot of challenges with the crown of the street, the flow line of the gutter, and the speed hump that were all combined in that one location. And then I do believe they're moving over to Myrtle next, where it kind of pivots over towards the park. That's my understanding.
Got it. I know when we were looking at that, we kind of looked at prioritizing specific projects within that, and I remember Valparaiso being a high priority set by both Planning Commission and City Council. Was Valparaiso one of the ones that ended up being too expensive?
It was the most expensive project.
So should I let residents know that's probably not going to happen when they're bugging me about it?
I would ask Public Works
Public Works?
for a status update, and then you'll have a direct, definitive answer as to,
Answer?
yeah.
Okay, I will do that, thank you. I see that several of our, the plan does talk about gardens and food and having a possible community garden across the way, and also looking at encouraging gardens over at Thomas Page Academy, which I know they used to have a garden. I'm not sure what the status is right now. But I wonder, because we've had so many conversations about partnering with Thomas Page, especially when we were looking at safe paths to school, if during those 222 meetings, where I believe this says that Councilmember Sparks is on that committee that's got the larger committee with City of Cotati, City of Roanoke Park, Cotati-Roanoke Park Unified School District, and SSU, if any of kind of the projects that we are talking about in here are ever addressed during that committee.
I can bring that forward to council when we present. I'm not aware.
Okay, excellent. And I think this one's probably definitely out of your jurisdiction, but I'm going to ask it anyways. It talks about neighborhood watch programs, and I know that that's something that my fellow commissioner has talked about as well before. And so has the city ever considered doing something like a community emergency response team, or doing something like the city of Santa Rosa does, where they host neighborhood block parties in an effort to raise awareness of any kind of emergency action plans that specific neighbors would need help with.
Yeah, I'm not-
NeighborFest, that's what it's called.
I'm not sure what efforts have been taken other than the evacuation route planning. I know the police department went around to all the HOAs and met with them individually. But one of the things that the council has prioritized for this budget year is neighbor engagement, community engagement, and community building to try to create some opportunities for neighbors to kind of engage and meet each other. So we're tasked with creating kind of a block party toolkit and some other things. I think your Neighbor Fest is a great idea, so that's an excellent suggestion. And that goal and those ideas are already prioritized in the council budget. But I think formalizing it in a maybe part of the recommendation from the commission that we add to the presentation when we take to city council next week, we'll bring that up as well.
Okay, excellent. I know that Rohnert Park was also looking at creating a toolkit specifically for Neighbor Fest that we could look at as a template. And I think those are the main questions that I have. Questions before we open to public?
It seems that the beat cops are going around and meeting with we've got 6 beat cops meeting with their 6. Maybe that can be a place where the community can have a fest as well. And maybe a dunk tank for a cop would really bring out the community. Just a thought. And raise money. Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry, my humor is getting away with me. We can't have humor here. So, yes, I wonder if the beat cop and the community meetings can somehow find a way together, since we already have the beat cops meeting with the communities.
I think that's a great suggestion.
In fact, I think those meetings are referenced in here as well, with a little worry about attendance levels. I think if they were Neighbor Fest block parties, attendance levels might increase a little bit.
Okay.
Right? Yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe add some food. Food always helps.
We have a lot of pizza in our town.
A lot.
As far as the 2x2x2x2 meetings, in the 20 years I was on the school board, I think we met 3 times. And in most cases, Rohnert Park was a roadblock. They wanted to put out the agenda instead of everybody putting into the agenda. And there was a lot of like, no, we're supposed to do it this way and that way. And for what a good idea it is, and I think we should have that type of open communication, sadly, I think they need to rethink that model and maybe go to a system where one of the partners hosts the meeting and the agenda, and maybe do it like 4 times a year. Each partner has one meeting, one agenda, so they can actually get conversation going and get things done.
All right, we're going to open this item up for public comment. Would anyone in the audience like to comment? No? Would anyone on Zoom like to comment?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Chair Moffett, that will end a public comment.
Thank you, Carla. Any other comments?
I would just say that I didn't know that I had a cop that was having a beat, that was having a party, and that I should attend. And I wouldn't have known about this high-low sirens if I hadn't read my packet. There's a lot of things I wouldn't know about. And I think it's because it's all online, and I'm a troglodyte, and I live underground, and I'm not online. So we need to find a way to reach out to our community that's not online. And I wonder if having a mailing is an idea to all the residents, not the homeowners, but the residents of our town, especially when we have our block parties. So I want to know. And if I'm not on the planning commission, I just don't. So, thanks.
Does the city use mailers?
Other than direct mailers for projects, we generally will put we've been trying to use the utility bill with the newsletter. And that goes to a pretty, actually, people have told us that's how they get most of their news, over electronic, over social media, that people really appreciate the newsletter. And so we've, actually, the city manager's office has taken some effort to try to redo that, update it, make it a little bit more appealing, easier to digest, easier to engage with. So we recognize that that's a very powerful messaging tool, and we're trying to expand on its availability and its reach to every citizen.
We good? Okay. Eli, thank you very much. These are two very large reports. They're full of fantastic information. I learned a lot. I thought I knew a lot. I didn't. You don't know what you don't know. I learned more, and I really appreciate the time and effort it takes to put these together, and the time and effort it takes to put these presentations together. So thank you. With that, we move on to agenda number 9, reports by staff.
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Just want to highlight a couple things. One, the advance agenda. So commissioners were provided a copy of the advance agenda, which just tries to telegraph some of the things we know are coming down the pipe. Just please recognize it's very tentative until we get further along. But we will try to use that and try to let you know more regularly with an updated version of that, probably monthly or maybe bi-monthly, to just let you plan out your meeting attendance. If we're going to cancel a meeting, we'll try to let you know as soon as we know. But a copy of that was provided in the back of the room for anyone who's interested in reviewing that. And then the other thing I want to add is that we have been, or the staff has been really working on the Climate Ready Cotati Fair, March 29th, 10 to 2 at the Depot building. We have about 30 vendors, or over 30 vendors, I think. And so now we're in full marketing mode. So please share that information with your groups, your neighbors, your friends. I think it's going to be a really great event, really interesting, fun. There'll be kids' activities. There'll be a book and puzzle exchange. So if you have some old books or puzzles or board games, you can bring them down and trade them in, get some new ones. There'll be clothing repair, clothing exchange. So if you have some things that need some knitting or minor repairs, you can get that done there. There's a bicycle repair. People will be doing minor repairs on bikes. That's just to highlight a few of the things. There'll be a pedal-powered smoothie maker, so you can come pedal your way to a smoothie. So I think it should be a lot of fun. It's our first event. The staff that put together the sustainability newsletter and the website have been putting a ton of effort. Carla and Eli and Autumn have been taking the lead on it. It's going to be the first one for the city. And we really hope it's a big success and people really turn out. So if you guys could help us and promote it, we'd love to see you all there. And we are also accepting volunteers. If anybody's interested in volunteering, there's opportunities. They're available on the website. But if you'd rather come chat with us, we can help you learn about volunteer opportunities. Just come meet with us at the front counter and we'll look into a time for you. And I think right now, manning the clothing swap table is the top priority for getting some volunteers to spend some time at the fair. So we will have some food trucks down there too. So we're really looking forward to having a really good event. Right now we're working on the playlist. So if you have any song suggestions, you can send those over to Eli and we will get those added to the playlist. But with that, that concludes the department report.
Reports by Planning Commission?
Yeah, I'm just curious, I'm going to be attending the Planning Commission training the California League of Cities is doing. Is anyone else going?
I think you were the only one who was prompt enough to make it. It oversubscribed, so they closed registrations pretty early And so you're in, but I don't believe anyone else from our staff got in.
Thank you for representing.
Is there any updates on the hotel? Is it still funding issues down there?
Yeah, they remain engaged, but no updates on actual changes to activity beginning.
Is it funded, is that?
Yeah, there's kind of yes, that's the issue.
I was happy to be able to do an introduction email with a couple different departments, but yours included, and Thomas Page. Did they ever get back to you?
Oh, we have not heard from them,
Okay, I will follow up with that then.
but I appreciate your email, and I have not proactively followed up with them either, so I will add that to my list.
Okay. It's important. But I can follow up too. Anything else? No? Okay, any information received after the agenda was posted?
Just the flyers for the fair and the advance agenda,
Thank you.
and the letter from Jen H.
Yes. And we determined that we've been addressing all three of these items, right?
Yeah, I do agree with some of their comments that we could always do better, but there's significant amount of nuance that should be added, and we have made a lot of efforts that they may not be aware of yet. So I'm meeting with them to inform them of all of our significant policy work here in Cotati.
Fabulous. I'm sure they'll be excited to hear about the Cotati density bonus. All right. Then it is 7:11, and I hereby adjourn this meeting.
Slurpees.
Well done.
I mean, Slurpees are always fun. It's first meeting. Didn't even crack that many jokes.